Hello, everyone. I hope that you all are having a wonderful Wednesday. It it's crazy how quickly the weeks seem to be flying by. I hope you all are enjoying, beautiful weather if you have it. Some of the warmer weather that's finally coming through. Yeah, I'm really excited to, talk about hypothyroidism today to really piggyback off of last week's topic, which was the connection between your adrenals and your thyroid. And now, we're slowly making our way into the thyroid area and hypothyroidism. I'm just going to quickly check to make sure that all of my places that I'm streaming are working, and it looks like it's working on Facebook. And let me check YouTube to see. Right. Of course, there's always loudness. Yay, perfect. So it looks like technology is working for me. It's been an interesting ride with technology as of lately. My computer decided to kind of go on the fritz last Thursday. I was starting to get black cubes all over my screen, and it wasn't the black screen of death. So knocking on wood that is all good now, and it was just a weird fluke. And then my vacuum went out on Saturday, so that was sad. I loved my vacuum from my wedding, but comes a new day for a new vacuum. So it is what it is. But I'm just happy that technology right now is deciding to work. So yay! All right. So it's a little after 12, so I'm just going to get started. If you are watching and want to pop on and say hi, let me know where you're watching from, what you're up to, how your spring is going. But also, if you do experience hypothyroidism, like symptoms, or if you've been diagnosed, I would love to hear that too. And any questions that you have, feel free to pop them in the comments section because I'm here to help. That's what I'm here for. I want to, make sure that you're getting all that you can out of this group and information. All right. So I know we talked about three weeks ago. Yes, 3 weeks ago, we talked about adrenal dysfunction and, all that entails, the lead up to that, the cortisol that increases, the inflammation that increases in the body. And then last week, we talked more about the adrenals and their connection to our thyroid. So we're leading up now to this thyroid problem and hypothyroidism, which is very, very common, especially in women in the US. And a lot of people don't even realize that they have a thyroid problem. But now leading up to hypothyroidism and getting into our thyroid. So hypothyroidism refers to decreased thyroid function or decreased action of the thyroid hormones in the body. So our thyroid hormones or the function of the thyroid is just less efficient. Things are not working like they need to. They're not in the ranges that they need to be. It's the most prevalent form of thyroid disease in the US and accounts for 80% of thyroid problems. It also affects at least 1 in 7 adults, and women do make up the majority. We are, 7 times more likely to develop Hashimoto's than men, unfortunately. Autoimmune conditions, a lot of times, are more common in women. So there are 2 forms that hypothyroidism can show up as. So it can show up as a non-autoimmune thyroid disease, and that's what we just kind of refer to as hypothyroidism or non-autoimmune hypothyroidism. And then there is the autoimmune form, which we call Hashimoto's thyroiditis or just plain Hashimoto's. So Hashimoto's is the most common form of all thyroid disease in the US. It accounts for at least 90% of all hypothyroidism. So in other places in the world, the non-autoimmune type is more common, and that's usually due to an iodine deficiency. So, like I mentioned, women are at least 7 times more likely to develop Hashimoto's than men, which, you know, we're here in the women's, chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia group. And here's a big problem that a lot of women aren't getting answers to, and or even getting diagnosed with, or having their thyroid fully checked like it needs to be. So in Hashimoto's, unfortunately, the immune system attacks the thyroid gland, which is located here in your neck. It makes it That's what makes it an autoimmune condition, is when your body starts to attack its own cells. So a large number of white blood cells, which are called lymphocytes, they're immune system cells, they accumulate in the thyroid and make antibodies, which start to then damage the thyroid and make it difficult to optimally or efficiently produce thyroid hormones. So then we can start to see a lot of issues with not, producing enough thyroid hormones. And without these adequate thyroid hormones, many of the body's functions then slow down. And sometimes that can happen quite drastically as well. So these antibodies determine whether or not you have Hashimoto's or the non-autoimmune hypothyroidism. So that's where, when you go into the doctor and you get your full panel done for your thyroid, you want to make sure that they're checking that you're getting the antibody tests done too, because we want to know, if you do have hypothyroidism, is it an autoimmune condition? Is it autoimmune hypothyroidism, or is it non-autoimmune? So we really want to be cognizant of that. So non-autoimmune hypothyroidism can be caused by a number of factors. So this is the one that, our immune system, it's not attacking our thyroid gland. So this is where we don't have the antibodies showing up. It's just regular old hypothyroidism. So it can stem from nutrient deficiencies, excess iodine exposure, but also iodine deficiency too. Exposure to certain foods that can just dampen your thyroid function. A lot of these are like goitrogens, and I'm not going to get into that today. This topic is going to continue on because it's obviously pretty big. So don't worry, we are going to get to all the different nutrients and all that stuff, I promise. And various challenges that prevent the body from effectively converting inactive thyroid hormone to the active form. So that's like our T3 right there that I talked about in the last video. So if you did not watch the last video, please make sure that you watch it, because that also helps set the stage for today's talk. Also, the inability of the body to effectively use the thyroid hormone. So this is kind of similar to, if you've heard of insulin resistance or cortisol resistance. You have insulin in the body, but the body kind of just stops responding to it. So you can have higher levels of insulin in your body, which causes problems, or higher levels of cortisol in your body, it just causes problems. So same with your thyroid. Your body can just stop responding to the thyroid hormone. So it turns into like a resistance in a way. Then, chronic or substantial stress can also suppress your pituitary gland enough to interfere with thyroid hormone production. Sometimes the body is making enough thyroid hormone, but the active form of the hormone is converted to an inactive form. So the active form, remember that free, like T3, it can turn into that inactive form, which we call reverse T3. It kind of puts the brakes on things in your thyroid and puts the brakes on, the thyroid stimulating hormone and all of that. So the body then, stores rather than uses this inactive form, and it leads to symptoms of hypothyroidism. Also, hypothyroidism may be due to more serious problems in the hypothalamus and pituitary glands. So your labs can show up as normal by standards, but you have symptoms of hypothyroidism. So that's where, like, talk to your doctor. We're not going to get into all of those things. But this kind of like ties in with, well, it does ultimately tie in with fibromyalgia and autoimmune conditions and, chronic fatigue. because there are so many things, so many similarities between these. So fibromyalgia is a particular condition that is often linked to hypothyroidism since they share similar underlying physiological factors. Uh, the symptoms are very, very similar as well. And up to 27 millions of patients diagnosed with hypothyroidism also are diagnosed with fibromyalgia. So there is one particular popular theory for this connection between the two conditions. So that hypothalamus, there's a connection there. So the hypothalamus is a gland that forms part of the human endocrine system, and it's responsible for many functions in the body, including the regulation of hormones, secretions by other glands, and more. So when our hypothalamus is suppressed, which our hypothalamus is definitely affected by fibromyalgia, it can lead to these other conditions too. Or unfortunately, like it could just be that like you've been diagnosed with fibromyalgia, but really you could have you could have hypothyroidism that is manifesting itself as symptoms, or symptoms that are very similar to fibromyalgia. So you can get this chronic pain, musculoskeletal pain, brain fog, all of this stuff that looks just like and mimics fibromyalgia. So really, it could be hypothyroidism that is leading to all of these issues for you and all of these symptoms that are popping up. So another thing is our thyroid hormone binds to receptors on our mitochondria. And I can't remember how many videos back, but I talked about mitochondrial dysfunction and how a lot of us with the chronic pain, with autoimmune conditions, but also with chronic fatigue, our mitochondria are severely dysfunctional. There we go. And that's an area that our thyroid hormone binds to. So if our mitochondria is like super dysfunctional, then our thyroid hormone likely isn't going to be able to bind to it or work as efficiently or do what it needs to do. So that's going to affect our thyroid in that way too. So it also, it binds to receptors on our ribosomes and chromatin as well, which they aid in protein synthesis and then more. But I really wanted to highlight the mitochondria. Like we went over this, we have dysfunction going on, and that's going to also affect our thyroid hormone and how it binds to our mitochondria. So symptoms of hypothyroidism, they can manifest as anxiety, brain fog, so poor memory and concentration, carpal tunnel syndrome, cold intolerance, constipation, depression, dry skin, fatigue, glucose intolerance, goiter, or it's like this swelling of the front of the neck. Basically, your thyroid starts to like swell. A lot of times that can be due to iodine deficiency. We start to see like that goiter starting to show up. But take note of what I'm listing off as symptoms, because I mean, do they seem pretty familiar for you? Minus, the goiter. But if you have that, then definitely get your thyroid checked. Excuse me, dry air in here. All right, just chug some water. All right, hair loss, high cholesterol, hormone imbalances. So if you struggle with PMS, irregular periods, cyclic breast tenderness, low sex drive, those are some big hitters for that hormone imbalance. Impaired memory, infertility, insomnia, insulin resistance, low immunity. So that includes like, are you getting colds frequently? Are you getting infections frequently? Your immune system is just down. It seems like you're getting hit over and over and over again. Menstrual disturbance, miscarriage, especially if you have miscarriage with any of these other symptoms, muscle weakness, nerve pain, postpartum depression, low breast milk production after a baby's born. If you have a slower heart rate or slowed mental processing, slowed physical movements, swelling or puffiness around the eyes, weight gain is big. I might have already said weight gain. If I did, I apologize. But if left untreated, hypothyroidism, obviously, if left untreated and you have Hashimoto's, it's going to majorly destroy your thyroid gland, which is really going to be hard. Like you can't recover that. So that's why, making sure you're getting these full thyroid panels and checking for antibodies so that we can, I don't want to say reverse, but kind of reverse like the damage that has been done, or stop the damage so that your thyroid gland is not being eaten away at, the tissue's not getting smaller and smaller, because we need to repair it. We need to make sure that we have enough thyroid there that we can function optimally when given the right conditions. But sometimes, if your autoimmune condition is too far down the line, it can be hard, and medication can be required then, just because you don't have enough of your thyroid to help you function. I don't know if that made sense. Let me know if it did or didn't, and I can clarify that. But if left untreated, hypothyroidism has been associated with weight gain, high cholesterol, cognitive decline, dementia, and heart disease. So those are just some of the things. Obviously, there could be more as well. So there is, kind of like this lead up that can, like, what causes, hypothyroidism, right? So when I talked about adrenal dysfunction, we went over a lot of stress and chronic stress, and this, like, your body being in like this SOS state, or survival overdrive syndrome state. And so there's a lot of inflammation going on. There's a lot of your body is like it's under attack from stress, and you have high inflammation. You have all these things going on. So that is one way, and the major way of leading to issues with our thyroid, because we've kind of done this step-by-step process now of, we talked about adrenal dysfunction, which when you get that, it messes with the thyroid, and now prolonged adrenal dysfunction is gonna likely have you end up with some hypothyroidism going on. So anytime the body is under prolonged stress, the body goes into an energy conserving mode. So who is responsible for going into this mode? The thyroid. So it responds by slowing down our thyroid hormone production and all of our body's energy expending functions, from metabolism to our reproduction. So, our body can't focus on our metabolism and our reproductive system if we are in chronic stress, or, at this heightened fight or flight mode all the time. Our body is like, we need to put out these fires immediately to survive. We can't focus on our metabolism right now. We can't do that. So we start to see these systems slow down, which is going to cause issues down the line. So chronic survival overdrive can cause your immune system to become confused then, and it can lead to autoimmunity, and that, Hashimoto's is that autoimmune condition with the thyroid. And our immune system can, like, just fire at random, and, like, that's where we start to see these autoimmune conditions arise. And a lot of times when we have one autoimmune condition, we tend to develop another autoimmune condition too, because it snowballs. So we need to get to the root to fix it. So again, root causes for, hypothyroidism or Hashimoto's, and a lot of these align with the same root causes for chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, other autoimmune conditions. And it's just figuring out what these root causes are. As you can see, it's such a tangled web that, like, when one system starts to go on overdrive and become too overworked, it leads to burnout in all these other systems, and we start to have all these dysfunctions in our other systems too. So chronic emotional and mental stress can be a huge root cause that leads to Hashimoto's or hypothyroidism, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, all of these things. Food triggers, like I've talked about with fibromyalgia, and in our group, gluten, a huge problem, can lead to Hashimoto's or hypothyroidism, especially if you have an issue with it. Celiac. A lot of people with celiac disease also struggle with Hashimoto's. Goitrogens. So that can be like a lot of the Brussels sprouts and cabbage and all these, they contain goitrogens, and those can be triggers for our thyroid. Low calorie diet. So if you have ever been one of the people who, has had severe caloric restriction, maybe suffering with an eating disorder in the past, or, you've done like the fad diets that, you restrict heavily on foods or calories, it affects our thyroid production. So during caloric restriction, our T3 concentrations decrease as a consequence. Our serum reverse T3 actually start to increase as a result of our metabolism slowing down. So there's less clearance of the reverse T3. So remember, when we're reverse T3, which is the brakes for our thyroid stimulating hormone, then if we have too much reverse T3, it's going to be like, whoa, 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 we don't need enough. We don't need as much, thyroid stimulating hormone. We don't need these hormones floating around. So then it's going to decrease the function of our thyroid in that sense. Nutritional insufficiencies. If you have a selenium deficiency, selenium is huge for our immune system. I mentioned it in way back, probably in one of the beginning videos of, nutrient deficiencies that are very common for fibromyalgia. But like our immune system in general, selenium plays a huge role, but it also plays an essential role in thyroid hormone synthesis. So, two enzymes that are involved in thyroid hormone production require selenium. So if you're deficient in selenium, you're not going to be able to produce the thyroid hormones. Iron, a deficiency impairs your thyroid hormone synthesis. Iodine, it's kind of a double-edged sword. You can have, if you have excess iodine, that can lead to hypothyroidism and Hashimoto's. If you have low iodine, that can also lead to hypothyroidism too. So we need to have, the Goldilocks of iodine in our body. Zinc, any low or deficiency with zinc can, lead to a low T3, T4 ratio. But same can happen, if you're low in selenium too. If you have a vitamin A deficiency or vitamin D deficiency, those can all lead to thyroid dysfunction as well, or, hypothyroidism. Gut imbalances, medications would fall under this. And I've talked a lot about imbalances with the gut. There are many ways that can lead to a gut imbalance. What I previously mentioned, that can lead to a gut imbalance, not getting enough sleep, all that stuff. But medications will fall under this category. And there are medications that can disrupt thyroid function for sure. These include beta blockers, birth control pills, estrogen replacement, lithium, phenytoin, theophylline, and chemotherapy. So those are just some of the many. Toxic overload can lead to hypothyroidism. But, at least 150 industrial chemicals have been shown to result in the reduction of thyroid stimulating hormone or our T4 production. Immune disruption and stealth infections. So Epstein-Barr, which a lot of people with fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, EBV is quite popular to trigger fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue. And you can get like stool tests and all that stuff to see if, you had Epstein-Barr virus, if you have a current infection, but you can see like if you've had it in your life too. So it's one of the most frequently considered environmental factors involved in autoimmunity, and a high prevalence of EBV infection in cases of Hashimoto's and Graves' disease has been shown. And Graves' disease is the autoimmune condition for hyperthyroidism. But I will not be talking about that today, just talking about the hypothyroidism. Inflammation in general, like chronic inflammation, can lead to hypothyroidism and Hashimoto's. It underlies all of these previous areas that I mentioned. So when we have inflammation constantly going on in the body, it's leading to a whole bunch of, different dysfunctions. It's building up to different dysfunctions in the body. inflammation is like one of the languages of all of the conditions that are going on. So there's that. Um, and now I just kind of want to go over optimal ranges for labs. So my biggest thing is to make sure that you are getting a full thyroid panel when you go to your doctor. So a lot of times our doctors or the Western doctors do not really look at the full thyroid panel. They look a lot at just your like TSH level. They don't really get into the free T4 or the free T3 or the reverse T3. They don't check everything that they need to give them the big picture. And the antibodies, they don't look at the antibodies like they need to. I can't say all of them do that, but a lot of doctors only look at like your TSH level and not really many of the other ones. I mean, maybe actually, like I would say maybe free T4 and TSH are like two of the big ones that they'll look at, but it doesn't give the big picture like it needs to. And there's a difference between, so when it comes to like functional medicine, there are optimal ranges that are looked at. So Western medicine tends to have like these standard ranges, but not everyone fits into these standard ranges. And the standard ranges don't really look at, okay, sorry, here is this big range, but where is like the optimal efficiency for this, for these hormones or, systems, how they function? How are they going to function most optimally? Like, what is that range? So you can be in a standard range, but it's not your optimal. And so therefore you're still having symptoms. Let me know if that made any sense at all. Sorry, it is really dry in here. So I'm going to go over the optimal range and then give you the standard range and you can see what I mean. So when it comes to the TSH, the optimal range for like the optimal functioning and what we really want it at is 0.4 to maybe 2 or 2.5, depends on your doctor, milli international units per liter. So just remember 0.4 to like 2 or maybe even 2.5. When it comes to the standard reference range, where a lot of doctors will be like, oh, you're in normal range, you're good. It's 0.4 to 5.5. So that optimal range was 0.4 to 2 or 2.5, but the standard goes all the way to 5.5. Like that's a pretty significant difference. So if you are having symptoms and let's say your TSH is at like a 3.5 or a 3.5 or even like a 4 or even a 5, in the Western medicine, they would be like, no, normal range, you're fine. You're fine. We don't need to look at anything else. Like, look, you are in the range, you're good. But if you were to go to a functional medicine doctor, they would say, yeah, something's a little weird, something's off. It's not in that optimal range. We want things more in the optimal range. So it makes sense as to why you're having these symptoms. So that's a pretty big difference. For free T4, the optimal range is 15 to 23 picomoles per liter. And when we look at the standard ranges, 9 to 23 is the range that they look at. So again, like if you're getting the TSH and the T4 checked, but they're in the ranges for standard, but they're not in the optimal ranges and you're having symptoms, that's right there pointing to a problem with your thyroid. So, or not necessarily saying it's a thyroid problem, but there's a high probability that there is like your thyroid is not working quite well or efficiently. So we need to improve that. Free T3 optimal range is 5 to 7 picomoles per deciliter. Standard, they actually go down to 3, but 7 is also the top for that range. For total T3, Optimal is 120 to 181 nanograms per deciliter. In the standard, it goes all the way down to 76 to 181. So 181 is still that top, just like it is in optimal, but the optimal ranges we want to see from 120 to 181. Standard is 76 to 181. Reverse T3, optimal, we see for 11 to 18 nanograms per deciliter. Standard is 11 to 31. So again, that's a pretty significant difference on the high end when looking at the optimal versus standard. So there is no not really like a reference range for your standard ranges for the ones I'm about to mention. So like free T3 to free T4 ratios, that we look more at like the functional medicine, and we want that ratio to be greater than 0.33. And then the T3 and reverse T3, we want that to be greater than 6. And then thyroid antibodies, we don't want any. We want it to be negative. So, when things start to show up, it shows there's something that is happening within the body and your thyroid. So with that said, that is all I have for you today on hypothyroidism. We will continue this topic next week. I'll talk about different foods that can help your adrenals, which then will also support your thyroid, because it's like this trickle down effect, right? So if we can address adrenal dysfunction, we can start to correct the thyroid. And then it's either we'll talk about the foods this next week, or I might get into hormones, or I might save that for later, but it continues on, you guys. So until next week, please let me know, drop below if you have any comments. I'm here to help, but I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your week, your Wednesday, and until next time, you guys take care. See ya.